I mean, this isn't in the 413. He said he'd do a quick bell end and reposition for the opposite runway, which, I mean, to be fair, it was unambiguous. So by that reckoning, it's fine.
Welcome to another episode of Learning to Fly. In this video, we cover the top 5 things you can do to improve your radio calls. And no, I'm no expert.
Charlie Alpha, do I continue on to taxiway C? Sorry, I've not done this bit before.
But I know someone who is. Air Traffic Control Officer Ben Wyatt is going to be on, and I'm going to get his insight of do's and don'ts to help us all out.
Golf Foxtrot Zulu, final to land 08 hard. Golf Lima Sierra, so Charlie 1 for ready for departure.
Golf Tango Oscar Echo Sierra and break. Golf Lima Yankee expect to vacate.
Golf India Oscar final 26.
Golf India Oscar runway 26. Golf Lima Yankee taxi. Golf Bravo Uniform Julia. Golf Echo Echo. Can you just Golf have a Foxtrot, Roger?
Please use this video as a conversation starter with your instructor. Now, if radio is something you want to improve further, and this isn't sponsored, I'm not getting paid for this, Kemble Flying Club are running a detailed course on radio you can do from your front room at kembleflyingclub.com/ground school. The link is in the description below. You can get more information on it. It's not just for beginner pilots who want to know and learn about the radio a bit more, but also for seasoned pilots as well who just want a refresher or to understand it a bit better. It's absolutely up your street. So go and have a look, and it would be fantastic just to help support the club in these difficult times. But regardless, it'd be great for you as well. So with that said and done, let's prove that air traffic controllers, they're not horrible people. They're not all scary. We can talk to them. Ben Wyatt, hello.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah,
it's good to know I'm not a horrible person.
Well, let's see. I'm going to get you to judge some of my radio calls later, so I might think you're a horrible person after that.
I might be a horrible person in that case.
So tell me what your job is so people watching now can understand why you're an expert in this.
I mean, that's your word, not mine. So I'm an air traffic controller. Have been for valid now 8 years. I've been working in air traffic for 13 years, started off as an assistant and then kind of worked my way up from there. So I work at a unit. We are tower and radar. So I've got 2 ratings, as it were, working for the military, but not in the military. And quite enjoy it. It's quite fun.
Okay. And in terms of a pilot, you are a National Private Pilot's license holder. And what have you flown before? What's your history there as well?
Not as much as I'd like, to be honest. As I said, I've got the microlight license. I've managed to do a bit of flying either through work or sort of privately in sort of the bigger Group A type stuff. But yeah, as you said, I've got a share in a Sky Ranger, had an X-Air before that, and prior to that did my training on Eurostars and C-42s, which you're well accustomed to. But yeah, it's just a nice little hobby, really, isn't it? Getting around, eating cake and drinking coffee and coming home again. It's ideal. Know who you're speaking to, and also know the differences between that. I mean, for a start, if you're talking to somebody with a radio call sign, that's obviously an air ground operator. Information, as you're mostly used to at Campbell, is a fires, obviously, and then your towers, your radars, and all the rest of it is sort of full air traffic, as it were. And it's to know the restrictions and what you can and can't expect from those different types of service. From my side of things, when I'm in tower, as a tower controller, it's nothing moves, nothing does anything essentially without permission. So it's full of instructions and full of sort of details, traffic information, things like that. It's quite not restrictive, but prescriptive, I guess, in that everything is more or less laid down. The information side of things, so for FISOs, you've got more flexibility as a pilot in the air, I would say. Yeah. But again, on the ground, you're following the instructions as always, be that taxi instructions, crossing runways, lining up on runways and all the rest of it, all that good stuff. In the air, collision avoidance ultimately remains solely the pilot's responsibility in that setting.
And that's why they'll say land at your discretion rather than cleared to land.
Absolutely. As mentioned, air ground, it's what you find at a lot of the smaller airfields with potentially not quite the traffic density, although I'm fully aware that everyone has their moments. It's all on the pilot, essentially, be it on the ground or in the sky. They're there to provide levels of information, so meta information, pieces of aerodrome information, runway information, but you won't get that specific traffic information or instructions. I mean, an air ground operator is unable to issue instructions. In fact, air ground in the UK at least isn't recognised as an air traffic service, which is not a lot of people know that. I think colloquially we all refer to anyone on a radio as, well, that's air traffic then, but in the eyes of the CAA and legally speaking, it's not. But they provide a very welcome service, especially if you're pitching up at an airfield you've never been to before and have no idea what the pressure setting is. So it's ideal.
Know the difference between what information you can expect, what you're going to be told, and what you should be doing on the air, in the air, and on the ground.
Absolutely. It's all part of the legal contract, really. So, I mean, things like landing clearances, takeoff clearances, obviously, touch and goes, any clearance to enter, backtrack, cross an active runway, that must be read back in order that whoever's on the other end of the radio, in the tower or whatever, knows that you've understood what's going on. On top of that, we've got, so your pressure settings. You need to know everyone's operating on the right pressure setting to make sure everyone's at the level that they think they're at and that they say they're at. And that's for the whole sort of spatial awareness piece. And things like when you're out and about, if you're under a radar service of some description, turns, so headings, levels, speeds, if you're under speed control, squawks, all of those things, they form part of that contract. And the contract, broadly speaking, is the type of service, which is also a mandatory read back. So if you're under a basic, read that back. If you're under a traffic or a deconfliction, read that back as well. Otherwise, it creates more work because we can't let it slide, particularly from an air traffic side of the controller side of things, for air traffic. We can't let it slide because we have a legal obligation to get those readbacks. So
if I forgot to say basic service and I've just read the pressure setting back, what would I expect to hear next from a controller or a FISO or whoever? Well,
from me, I'd just back in with your call sign, confirm basic service, and I would keep going that until you actually said the words back to me. Yes. That's something that it's not necessarily as laid down if you sort of prefer to Cat 413 and all the rest of it, which obviously we all read religiously because it's the best document that's ever existed, of course, and definitely not particularly dry or anything. But yeah, I always say check in on frequency, give your call sign and the type of service potentially, or in a sort of radar setting, or call sign, request taxi, allow the controller to come back to you. Give us 10 seconds or so. The frequency might sound very quiet. You might be the only aircraft on that frequency. Potentially that controller is working more than one frequency. We call it bandboxing. Often that's cross coupled, which means you can hear it as well, but sometimes it's a completely different sort of box altogether.
Right.
So they might be working another frequency, another aircraft on another frequency, and they'll come back to you in due course. Again, there's lots of communication from controlling agency to controlling agency, which you might not necessarily be aware of. Direct dial landlines, things of that nature. The controller might be doing a handover, anything like that really, which can take up to 30 seconds of almost constant talking. So checking on frequency with your call sign. If you're after a basic service, throw that in there as well. So if we've caught it, we know what to expect. We don't need to go giving squawks or anything silly like that. It will save you radio time in the long run as well, because for example, worst case scenario is you go piling in with request taxi with information blah via blah to wherever and all the rest of it, and it's a 10, 15 second radio call. If the guy's on the landline, he can't hear you. If he's on another frequency, he's heard someone chatting, but doesn't necessarily know the ins and outs of what they want. And you'll get, say again, and you've got to do it all again. And if you absolutely nailed the call the first time, you're guaranteed to cock it up the second time and sound like a plums. So
Sod's law. That I think that's Sod's law, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, it's where it comes in to practice makes perfect and all that, and building those triggers and building those structures and patterns. I generally work off the assumption of, if I'm in the aircraft, who am I, what am I, where am I, and what do I want? Just those four things in that order. And that's, as a controller, the most important things that you need to get. Right. Anything else will come back to you and say, okay, request your destination or origin or level if it's necessary, anything like that. So if we need anything else, we'll come back to you and ask for it. But if we get who am I, what am I, where am I, and what do I want, that's the order we ideally want it in. As I said, we'll come back and request any further information that we might need.
Perfect.
And one thing to bear in mind as well, we're having to write everything that you're saying down. So don't motor mouth your way through it necessarily.
And that's something else as well that probably fits under this tip, is keep everything pretty punchy, which is something I don't necessarily do, but I know that's something that should be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly when you're out and about, if you're under a basic service or any type of service, sometimes we might need to get hold of you. So always keep half an ear tuned into the radio. For a start, it gives you better situational awareness. If you can hear that someone's called downwind and you're crosswind, you already know to be looking for that without the guy in the tower having to tell you necessarily.
Yep.
If you can chime in, report downwind and say you're visual with the one ahead, that's kind of ideal. Saves a little bit of work from our end, sort of thing. But yeah, just listen out for your call sign, because there might be a pressure change. It could be anything. It could be fairly urgent, and we're trying to get hold of you. And if it takes 2 or 3 attempts for you to go, was that for me? I think it was, and then you eventually come back in. Then it's all part of the sort of situational awareness side of thing, I guess.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is very bravely of me, and depending on how horrible you feel today, Ben, you're going to review some of the recent radio, maybe mistakes, if you want to call it that, or just bits of radio that I feel like I could have done better. And actually, jumping off the last point there from your top 5 things we should do to be better at radio, one of them was listen, and I don't think I do it very well in this clip.
Golf Foxtrot Zulu, crosswind.
Foxtrot Zulu, number 1, port final to land.
Wilco, Golf Foxtrot Zulu. Foxtrot Zulu, downwind to land, 08 hard.
What could I have done better there? Well, I had a couple of comments. One guy called Neil said, yeah, really crosswind, I shouldn't have called there. That's not part of an overhead join.
Technically, it's not. I mean, it's a legitimate place to say that you are in the circuit, but it's not one of those standard calls that we would necessarily expect. As I think in previous videos, you've kind of worked your way through that as well, explaining the overhead join. But yeah, we'd expect the overhead call or dead side descending, one of those two, and then the downwind and the final. Those are the mandatory calls, really. You call crosswind, not really anything wrong with that. And you got the response from the FISO there of the port final number 1, I believe it was.
Yep.
And which is, again, legitimate. That's fine as well. You then called downwind and got the same response. It's not a massive thing. I guess my thoughts are it's possibly one of a couple of situations is potentially a bit of expectation bias from the FISO. He was expecting the next call for you to make to be downwind. So he's responded accordingly with what he would respond to a downwind call is report final number 1.
Right.
Potentially could be that. Or it may well be that he's aware that you're crosswind, he's heard that you're crosswind and all the rest of it. And because he sort of emphasizes that you're number 1, it's almost to say, if there's nothing else going on, don't necessarily call me downwind, call me final, and I can sort of address it at that point. I don't want to speak on behalf of whoever was in at the time. But in which case, I mean, you might have been all right not calling downwind, but it's one of those mandatory calls. So if you're going to have a habit, you may as well have that habit. Like, as I always say, it's better twice than not at all, really.
See, these controllers, they're all right. Honestly, they're not that bad. Okay, so
Cheers, mate.
Have a look at this next clip, see what I could have improved here, Ben.
Golf Charlie Echo Foxtrot Zulu is a Eurostar at Woodside 1 POB. Request airfield information and taxi for a departure off the hard, please. It's for a local flight to the south for about an hour.
I wrote down here, it's the who, what and where were absolutely marvellous. And then the what do I want portion of your call was just a hodgepodge collection of vowels and syllables and noises.
And taxi for a departure off the hard, please. It's for a local flight to the south for about an hour.
Which is fine.
So if I was gonna, I mean, I've done better calls than that, asking for, requesting for airfield information. But I suppose is it a case of jotting down what I want to ask for, or is it a case of just really thinking before I actually push to talk button?
Yeah, that's one note that I made actually. It was not necessarily to the point of rehearsing the entire call before you deliver it, because sometimes that's not practical. But having an idea and have thought about it, if not rehearsed it, before that finger's on the button, and it will sound more polished. I mean, one thing I've spoken about you in the past as well, actually, is that it's never as bad as you think it sounds that it is.
Yeah,
that's good English, isn't it? That's the worst thing. What a time to go using far too many words. Eh? Think it through in your mind. Yeah, who am I? What am I? Where am I? What do I want? I mean, realistically, in that situation, you wanted to taxi.
Yeah.
Anything else, the controller, the FISO, the air ground operator can come back to you. If he needs to know whether you're off to the north, south, how long you're out for, anything like that, they can come back to you, and then you can just answer their question more or less plain English. Equally, don't beat yourself up. It was still broadly fine. It could just be better.
Let's have a look at the next clip.
Golf Charlie Alpha, do I continue on to taxiway C? Sorry, I've not done this it before.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a couple of comments on that video, like, "Oh, you should really study the chart of the airfield and stuff," and I should. That wasn't great from me, particularly as I learnt there. Like, I should have known that, but I'd never been on that taxiway before. What do you, as a controller, how pissed off would you been with me that day?
To be honest, not very. I mean, if it's something you say you did all your training there and all the rest of it, and that's not something you've seen before. So that sounds potentially like it's slightly non-standard way of operating.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they're sending you a different way because of waterlogging, anything like that.
It was that, actually.
Yeah. Was that what it was?
Yeah.
And like you said, aside from knowing every single taxiway and every airport in the country, you had the briefing material available to you, but you just wanted confirmation. And I'd say, as a controller, if you're ever uncertain of an instruction, don't try and cuff it, muddle your way through, and hopefully it'll be all right. Because if you take a left when you should be taking a right, and you end up wandering somewhere you shouldn't, onto a runway or near a helicopter, if we're talking about the sort of impact that can have with us as little light boys. Yeah. If in doubt, just plain English. I'm not sure where I'm going. Where do you want me to go now? Kind of thing. Like,
right.
It's not necessarily a big deal.
In terms of stuff that you've heard and seen, you've been doing it for years, as you said, but you must be hearing odd things and calls all the time. Have you got any stories that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, we had a runway change once. We swapped ends, basically, and there was one aircraft in the circuit. I told him we were swapping ends, and I mean, this isn't in the 413. He said he'd do a quick bell end and reposition for the opposite runway, which, I mean, to be fair, it was unambiguous. So by that reckoning, it's fine.
I'd love to see that procedure in the training syllabus.
The bell end join.
Bell end. I've been called worse.
No, same. Not on the frequency, but yeah, broadly.
I was going to say.
Yeah, but I mean, I work at a unit there's a lot of training takes place, so we get strange things from sort of ab initio, sort of very low hours pilots quite frequently, I'd say. I've had aircraft in the overhead requesting taxi, that throws you. Things like that, or what else we had? Simulated cock in the smoke pit, that was a good one. At least it was simulated, hey?
Yeah, well.
But yeah, it's not just from the pilots. I mean, I've said things in the past, I've asked aircraft to report the airfield in shite. I've asked them to report chocolate chips complete rather than cockpit check. So we all get a bit tongue-tied sometimes, so it's fine.
Cool. Before we wrap this up, let me just say that I will put Ben's Instagram and channel details below and in the top right now. So that's brilliant. Definitely go and follow him. Absolutely. For Sky Ranger pictures and all the stuff that we used to do when we didn't have lockdown. And also, if you've got any questions, drop them below. I'm sure, Ben, you wouldn't mind getting back to some people if that's something we can do. I'm absolutely no expert on this, so I won't be answering any questions now.
You will be by the time we're done with you, mate.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks. So, yeah, hopefully that was useful for you. Thanks for watching. Ben, nice one. Thanks for coming along, buddy.
Anytime, mate. Stay safe.